Hi guys, Steven here from Tech Testers and welcome back to our channel, and today we're going to be reviewing a lot of Nvidia GeForce RTX cards. 18 of them in total. We don't have all of them here because you wouldn't be able to see me. We're also not going to worry too much about how the RTX compares to the GTX series today or how it compares to the AMD RX Vega. There's already a ton of reviews to cover that information. We are simply going to talk to those of you that are looking to buy an Nvidia RTX card and you're simply wondering which one you should get.
This video is brought to you by Corsair's new Dominator Platinum RGB memory. With their high speeds, beautifully crafted aluminum heat spreaders, and innovative RGB technology, these modules take RGB memory to the next level. Get yours using the links in the description below.
So let's start with Asus, or at least go alphabetically, and the Asus ROG Strix models are pretty much the tried and tested formula of the GPU market. We've seen them do a similar design over the last couple of years, and considering how popular these models are, it's kind of hard to blame Asus for sticking to their tried and tested formula. In the 20 series, they've updated the design a bit, at least for the 2080 and 2080 Ti, as the RTX 2070 is the exact same cooler model as the GTX 1080 Ti. Now they've updated the fans a bit with a little edge on the side, which is supposed to make it a bit quieter. And one interesting thing they added this time around is they added a quiet mode switch. Now Asus cards traditionally are very cool and just slightly noisier. Now for the US and the Asian markets, that is considered to be the better choice. However, us Europeans are quite tricky when it comes to sound, so they added a quiet mode switch to focus on a low noise production rather than an extremely low temperature. They also added a LED off switch this time around, which is kind of cool if you want to turn LED off, but at the same time you're kind of buying Asus RG products for the RGB, so not quite sure how many people are going to be using that. Now, generally speaking, Asus is quite shy with their slightly more budget options, which is a shame because generally speaking, they're quite solid. So over here we have the GeForce RTX 2080 Dual. Now this is Asus' slightly more budget alternative. However, don't mistake budget for poor quality or, less cool or anything like that, because it has a chunky heatsink. The only thing they saved on is they simply took off one fan, they didn't add any RGB to it, and it doesn't have a quiet mode or any other alternative mode, but it's still a very chunky graphics card. Personally, I also think it looks very good with a nice black and white color scheme. It has a backplate, so it has all the quality trademarks of a nice looking GPU. So one of the nice things about the Dual is that it also uses a reference PCB. So if you're looking to make a custom water build and you need a reference PCB for your water block, then you can actually consider this model for that. Now let's move on to Gigabyte. And Gigabyte has two main new designs this year that they're using for both the 2070, 2080 and RTX 2080 Ti. Now the standard model, which they use for both the WindForce and the Gaming OC models, the WindForce would have gray details, the Gaming OC would be completely black. It's a pretty standard GPU cooler design. It's not overly large, which is nice for compatibility. It's also not overly exciting, so it might not be the most inviting model to buy right away. However, Gigabyte is focusing on two things that we shouldn't underestimate. One, price, is they're trying to be slightly cheaper than the competition, and the second is they're offering a 4th year of warranty. Now, as far as tangible benefits go, if you think about stuff like software and RGB, I think an extra year of warranty is one of the nicest things to have. Now there's also another thing that Gigabyte is doing, which we really appreciate, and it's for the Gaming OC model, there is now a completely white one as well. So it's a similar model with a white shroud and a white backplate. So for those of you that have a white case or a monochrome system combination of some kind, this is going to look very, very nice. Generally speaking, completely white GPUs would be either expensive or difficult to get, and this one is neither. Now onto Gigabyte's high-end option, and that's the Aorus Xtreme, and this is a completely different beast from the Gaming OC because this thing looks ridiculous. It's huge, you cannot get around it. It has a ton of RGB both around it as well as in the actual fan. It's addressable RGB as well. And we have to give compliments to Gigabyte for actually coming out with a design that's different and unique and daring. And this thing looks amazing. There's a bunch of different software profiles, a lot of RGB profiles in the software. It looks fantastic. It has a bunch of different connectors. So if you, for example, need 3 HDMI ports, it's great. If you need 3 display ports, it offers that as well. And it also comes with a little GPU holder. So if the GPUs are sagging in the case that you're using, this will fix that problem. Let's move on to MSI, and MSI has two models for the RTX 2080 and RTX 2080 Ti. Now the more mid-range affordable model would be the Duke, which is a fantastic looking graphics card. It's actually one of the cheaper RTX 2080 Ti's in the Netherlands, and it looks great. It's 3 fans, it has a nice solid shroud, it has a big chunky heatsink, it has a nice backplate. It has all the trademarks of a fancier GPU than the price suggests. There's not much in the way of features like alternative mode or accessories. There's a little GPU holder, but unfortunately that doesn't work in half the case we put it in, so let's just pretend that's not there. It is, however, a nice solid card to look at. Now, the MSI Gaming X Trio for the RTX 2080 and 2080 Ti looks just like it's on steroids. It is a slightly bulkier version, it's slightly thicker, so do check the compatibility of it. It has a bunch more RGB and it absolutely looks fantastic. Now do keep in mind that for the RTX 2080 Ti you do need an extra power connector. So aside from the two typical 8 pins, you need another 6 pin. That means that a lot of power supplies out there that would normally be able to run an RTX 2080 Ti fine are gonna need an extra connector. Now for the RTX 2070, MSI uses a completely different naming scheme. So this is their high-end model, which is called the Gaming Z, which is kind of like a Gaming X Trio, just slightly shorter because it only has 2 fans. It's still fairly bulky though, and as far as depth goes, it's still a heavy heatsink, still has a fantastic backplate, and it has a bunch of RGB. One of the things that we really like about this one is, as far as fancy RTX 2070s go, is that this one is not that expensive. It's usually about 50 euros a dollar cheaper than both the Aorus Xtreme and the ROG Strix. Now the other model from MSI for 2070s we have is the Armor, and the Armor might be affordable, but it doesn't look like it, or doesn't feel like it. It is a very decent looking graphics card. It has a big heatsink. It doesn't look or feel anything other than a high-end one. It kind of reminds me of the old Gaming X models, except they changed the terrible red, which was hard to work with, to a more practical white. Now onto the actual testing. So in order to disqualify any early boost cheating, which a lot of cards boost a lot higher in the first minute or so, which skews benchmarks, we tested all of these after 30 minutes of load. So we took the average between the 30th and the 40th minute. We're looking at core speed, we're looking at memory speed, we're looking at average temperatures during that time, as well as average noise production at 50 centimeters. Now we're testing at 50 centimeters because that would be a realistic distance when you have your computer next to you on your desk. We're also looking at power consumption, which we'll measure at the wall, both when we're running a GPU load only, as well as when we're using a CPU and a GPU load. So you have a rough estimation of how strong a power supply you need for these cards.
Let's start by taking a look at the average clock speeds of our 7 RTX 2070 models, and by explaining that this is actually the least important graph to consider. Raw speed might sound like the most important, but it can vary so strongly from sample to sample, meaning that whatever we measure says nothing about the card you end up buying. Now the RTX 2070 Gaming OC is a good example of that, because there's really no good reason why one color of the same card would be faster than the other, aside from sample variance. Now it's worth highlighting the Gigabyte Windforce and the MSI Armor here, the only 2 cards in the list without the OC label. Now Nvidia bins the RTX 2070s, meaning that any card sold without the OC label might simply not clock as high, making buying one a bit of a gamble. It doesn't mean the Armor is better, it simply means we got lucky there and a bit unlucky with the Windforce. Now if you want a cheap RTX 2070, you can't go wrong with either, depending on local pricing, but if you don't want to take any chances, and we prefer not to, buy the version with OC in the name for a bit more money. Now onto the efficiency of the design, and that's the main thing we can objectively review. Generally speaking, it's fair to say that none of these cards are loud, and none of them run anywhere close to hot or are throttled in any way. Now the Asus ROG model does impress with insanely low temperatures, but it does so with a bit more noise, and more importantly, the price is really close to RTX 2080s. Now the same goes for the $700 RTX 2070 Aorus Xtreme, and it's kinda hard to recommend any RTX at that price, especially considering how well the cheaper options perform. Now this actually means that the 2 cards that stand out the most are the Gigabyte Gaming OC and the MSI Gaming Z. The Gaming Z being the quietest RTX 2070 while also keeping temperatures down and not being too expensive. That makes it a very nice combination. And even though the Gigabyte Gaming OC doesn't seem that particularly spectacular in the performance graph, we will point out it's still plenty cool and quiet, it's plenty fast, and when we pull up the price graph, it actually is one of the cheaper options out there. Now let's move on to the RTX 2080, where it becomes really difficult to pick a favorite. Speed-wise, all our samples are actually really close. Asus is definitely showing their cooling prowess again, with both the ROG and the Dual doing very well, but again it's the price of the ROG model that simply disqualifies it from a win, no matter how cool it actually is. Now honestly, I feel there's just so little to tell the MSI Gaming X Trio, MSI Duke, Gigabyte Gaming OC and Asus Dual apart, especially when we actually gamed on these cards for a while as well, that you can basically make a choice based on your own brand preferences. Now from Asus, the Dual is definitely the one to watch because it's extremely efficient and not that expensive. However, the MSI Gaming X Trio runs about equally quiet, only slightly warmer, yet at the same time it offers a ton of RGB while being slightly cheaper again. Now by now you've probably also noticed that we added the Inno3D iChill X3 Jackal model to the results, and this card came in just after we filmed the previous bits. However, it's worth pointing out that this one comes with a very interesting unique fan swap, and we'll have a separate video on it soon. But the bottom line is that it's another form over function design. It definitely offers RGB heaven, but at the same time it's warmer and noisier, and given the current higher pricing, objectively harder to recommend. Now it's actually similar to the Aorus Xtreme in some ways. For example, they both really rely on the RGB appeal and the efficiency, but we see the Aorus Xtreme is actually quieter and cheaper, so if you want something visually crazy, that's the one we'd go for. Although if you ask me what I'd actually go for, it would be the Gigabyte Gaming OC again, as we see that one staying cool and quiet while offering a better price and the extra year warranty. So onto the big league then, the RTX 2080 Ti, and when we pull up the power consumption numbers, it becomes clear that this beast loves its power. This also means that any form over function design like the Aorus Xtreme, they really start to struggle a bit. Temperatures go up, noise production go up. Now it's fine if you really love the looks, but it's really hard to call it objectively the best one out there. Now the Gigabyte Gaming OC thermals and noise seem great, but keep in mind they do benefit from drawing a lot less power. Having said that, we can still safely assume that the remaining 4 all show decent efficiency results. Now I feel like I'm becoming a bit of a broken record when I say again it's the Asus running a bit cooler, the MSI running a bit quieter, and Gigabyte stealing a lot of their thunder with the extra warranty, but it is what it is. Especially considering the reports on the RTX 2080 Ti memory issues. Personally, I'd care more about securing my investment, because let's not forget how expensive each of these cards is, than caring about a few megahertz or a few decibels. Or in the case of the MSI Duke, when we compare to the Gaming OC, a slightly nicer design. But what if you want the baddest, fastest, most kick-ass RTX 2080 Ti, and it becomes a bit of a fight between the Gaming X3 from MSI and RG Strix, both looking fantastic, both being fast, and both offering plenty of efficiency. Again, the Asus running a bit cooler, MSI running a bit quieter, even though Asus does offer quiet mode, which balances that out. And it's kind of hard again not to start looking at secondary elements like the pricing, where MSI does slightly better, the RGB sync software, which is Asus's territory, or again the RGB feature itself, which again in my opinion MSI wins. At least it's fair to call them functionally identical, and both are ultimate RTX 20 Ti's. Choosing between the two of them is literally splitting hairs.
So let's conclude and pick 2 models of each. Now, as far as the 2070 goes, the Gigabyte Gaming OC just makes so much sense at the price point with the performance and the warranty. If you're looking to spend a bit more, again, it's the Gaming Z from MSI you're going to be looking at. It's a slightly fancier, slightly more expensive option. Now with the RTX 2080, same story. The Gigabyte Gaming OC offers a lot of sense at that price point with, again, MSI, this time with the Gaming X Trio, this one over here, offering just a slightly nicer design at a slight price premium. Alright, picking my favorite RTX 2080 Ti, again it's the Gigabyte that makes so much sense with the warranty and the performance. Picking the absolute best though between the RG OC and the Gaming X Trio, we feel like MSI really hits or nails every hit with the Gaming X Trio. It is such a nice looking card. However, Asus nails the user experience with their RGB software simply being better. And if you're looking to spend that much money on a graphics card, we do feel like every element should be fine. It's a damn tough fight though, and as soon as MSI nails their software, Asus is really going to have a tough time. Just a little bit more love for the Gigabyte Aorus Xtreme there, because we do have to compliment companies that dare to do something different and to dare to put another design out there. Obviously as testers we always have to go for objectively, or always have to praise the objectively best cooler, but we also want to give credits for, you know, designers that do want to go out and make something that really satisfies the RGB master race, because that card does that better than anything else in this roundup. So that's it for today, guys. We hope this helped. Keep in mind that, you know, none of these cards are actually bad. So if you find a decent deal on any one of these in your region, or if you really like the way one looks, nothing should stop you from going for that. We just hope that our test and our experience helps you make a better decision. Anyway, give us a like if you liked this video, if you thought it was helpful, subscribe to see more, and we hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.